Queensland has officially introduced new laws targeting coercive control this week. It's the second Australian state to introduce such laws. On the one hand, I get how bad coercive control can be, and I think we do need to be able to prosecute offenders somehow. On the other hand, I always get very, very nervous and uncomfortable when we give governments and courts the power to criminalise behaviour that doesn't involve physical violence or that might rely heavily on only subjective viewpoints about a person. Because laws like that are open to abuse by governments, and it must be managed with a lot of caution. And I just don't have enough faith anymore in our criminal justice system that it can be trusted not to become ideologically biased by bureaucrats and policymakers. As we'll see in a moment, there's already cause for concern emerging in some states that these new coercive control laws may be being policed in a sexist way. And sexism against men is showing up even in media coverage around these new laws, as we'll also show you later in the show. So what are coercive control laws? Well, these new Queensland laws, like the New South Wales ones that were brought in last year, criminalise patterns of controlling behaviour in intimate relationships, even when no physical violence occurs. The definition of coercive control is persistent actions that isolate, intimidate, or manipulate a partner. Things like monitoring their movements, cutting off their finances, or restricting social connections. And under Queensland's new law, this form of abuse now carries a maximum sentence of 14 years jail. So this is very serious stuff. In Queensland, they're calling it Hannah's Law, to honour Hannah Clark and her 3 children who were tragically killed by her ex-partner in 2020. That horrific and extremely upsetting case sparked national calls for stronger protections against non-physical abuse by an intimate partner. So there's a lot of emotion behind this, and there is no way that the new LNP government in Queensland would block or modify the laws that passed under Queensland's old Labor Party government last year. Here's how ABC TV News reported it this week.
The laws aim to make it illegal to engage in a pattern of controlling or abusive behaviour if you're an adult and you're threatening, isolating or frightening a current or former partner, family member or informal carer. State Parliament last year passed legislation to make it a standalone offence, but it's taken months to train police and the judiciary ahead of the laws taking effect.
ABC News there. Now, as we said, New South Wales passed similar laws last year, and Tasmania has had provisions for controlling behaviour under its Family Violence Act since 2005. Other states, including South Australia, Victoria and Western Australia, are still evaluating how to best legislate against coercive conduct, and they haven't worked it out yet. We're interested to know what you think. Is this a case of government going a bit too far, or do you reckon it's justified given how serious coercive control can be? Let us know in the comments. So in the first half year after the introduction of the coercive control laws in New South Wales, the New South Wales Bureau of Crime Statistics and Research says that police recorded 157 incidents. That's since July 1, 2024, when they came in last year. But the number of cases that had actually progressed to prosecution out of that 157 was 2. Experts say that this is because coercive control involves a pattern of behaviour over time. Therefore, it's challenging for the police to gather sufficient evidence. Also, the police and lawyers are still getting used to the new requirements for identifying and prosecuting cases. Now, it probably won't surprise anyone that it hasn't taken long for controversy to emerge around gender bias in the policing of these laws. You might think that more women might be subject to prosecution for abuse that's less physical and more psychological. But apparently not. Of the 157 incidents in New South Wales, 149 involved alleged male actions against women. But all may be not as it seems. Concerns have been raised by some police that the training that they're getting in this area is actually teaching them to focus more on potential male offenders and ignore female ones. Even more worryingly, it seems that some family lawyers have been telling women to make false domestic violence allegations against men to win a better deal in family court actions. And this is already starting to extend to the new concept of coercive control. 2 Queensland police whistleblowers told men's rights activist Bettina Arndt on her YouTube channel last year about exactly this problem. The whistleblowers' identities were disguised to protect them, But let's have a listen to a bit of that interview. Let's start with the male police officer, Paul, and then move on to his female colleague.
It's a case of the relationship has gone bad. There's a custody dispute going on. I need to get the WAP, another domestic violence order, to silence my partner. So I'm now going to retrospectively go over the last 10 years of our relationship and look for anything and everything that I can try to turn and say, that's coercion and control.
Yep.
Now, psychologists struggle to determine what's coercion and control. I haven't done 13 years at a university. How am I supposed to determine that?
You can. Psychologists don't know because it's only just been made up. This whole thing has been concocted only in the last few decades.
Dad has control of all the finances. So he has control of all the bank accounts. He has control of all paying the bills, all of that kind of stuff. And at this point, Mum's okay with that. She's fine because she doesn't really have an interest on sitting down with internet banking and going through all of the processes and passwords. If for some reason their marriage was to break down now, and she turned around and said, oh, after all these years, he's been coercively controlling me, making me think that he needs to take care of the finances.
Yeah. Would that be enough?
Dad, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
I will eat my hat if that wasn't enough.
Yeah. I mean, it's just terrifying. And
that is scary and disgusting.
Two police officer whistleblowers speaking to men's rights activist Bettina Arndt on her YouTube channel last year. So there are two sides to everything. We've got a highly emotional and tragically sad case in Queensland, a story so horrific that you have to be a psychopath not to feel some deep sadness and anger at what happened to Hannah Clark and her beautiful children. So naturally then, the public demands the government steps in and does something. Then the government does, it brings in new laws, and so often nobody thinks through how those laws might cause unintended consequences that are actually bad. Unfortunately, our dependence on government has become the new Australian way. We seem to think that government should fix everything, that it should meddle in everything, and that it's always going to be a good thing. It isn't. Sadly, some things are not able to be fixed in life by more government intervention, and giving government too much power over us can lead to all sorts of terrible unintended consequences and abuse and misuse of laws and even corruption. Anyway, do we have a story for you now about how the implementation of laws can lead to more injustice, harm and suffering than the laws were originally designed to prevent? Dr. Fiona Gherkin is an academic from the University of Tasmania, and she was working with Tasmania Police, doing their training courses and teaching police about how to handle domestic violence cases and situations that they get called to. I say she was doing this because 2 weeks ago, Dr. Gherkin went public about her concerns about how the police were being educated. She did this in an online interview with Bettina Arndt, and as a result, the Tasmanian police have now said that they're not going to use her services anymore. Dr. Gherkin joins me now. Fiona, welcome to The Other Side. It's good to have you here.
Thanks, Damien. Thanks for having me.
I want to get into what happened to you since you did that interview with Bettina a couple of weeks ago after the break that we'll take in a moment. But that in itself is a story that we've got to explore. But I want to cover, first of all, just what you said to Bettina, what the original interview was all about for people who haven't had a chance to see it yet. Why did you decide to go public? And what was the message you felt you needed to get across?
Yeah, look, I'm really big on looking at both sides of the story, as you were saying. And there's not a lot of people that are willing to discuss the side that men can be victims. And I was hearing from police repeatedly that they were seeing just as many men as women when they went into homes. So I started to explore this idea a bit further, and I used to do family mediation and saw a lot of that in that process. So this has been something that's happened to me over time. And now speaking with police, it was like, hang on a minute, this is probably getting worse than I thought. But I knew that Tasmanian police were doing an amazing job. You know, they were really careful about making sure people were not misrepresented. And I wanted to share that. And I wanted to share my approach to teaching that was more of a humanistic approach rather than a feminist approach.
So really you weren't criticising the police in Tasmania?
No.
What was going on?
No,
you were
not at
basically
all.
saying that the training needs to focus on them going into a situation and looking at the behavior, assessing it that way, and not looking at gender, not turning
Yes.
it into a gender bias issue. Why the need, though, if they're not doing that, if they were already behaving themselves and doing a good job of looking at the behavior, where was this concern of yours coming from? Was it coming from what you were seeing in the bureaucracy?
I think it's more just generally what you hear in the community. It was like it wasn't public, and I didn't realize how underground the way I was teaching had become. And I think it was that they wanted the community sector to think they were teaching from a gender-based violence approach, women as victims, men as perpetrators.
Oh, they wanted the community to think that.
I think so,
Wow.
given their
For
response to
political
me
reasons.
and what I said.
Right.
But they were well aware how I was teaching, because I don't want cops to go into, especially new recruits, I don't want them to go into a home and make assumptions, but they obviously come into becoming a police officer, having heard all those messages that are out there in the community. So I wanted to make sure that when they went into a home, they could actually identify the person that was most in need of protection. And it was certainly, I believe it was working, and the police were impressed with what I was doing. But obviously, I think it was who I spoke to, not so much what I said. And I think people have made assumptions based on the conversations I had, but I was really only talking about one aspect of how I teach, to try and have a more balanced, equal approach in teaching, so that the police can make the best decision possible based on evidence.
In academia and in the bureaucracy and working in the public service, were you you believe that the dominant view was too far in that sort of radical feminist direction of assumptions about women always being the victim?
Yeah, definitely. And I think things are changing. There's certainly been a shift. There's certainly been a shift in recent years. And, you even see that in the workplaces as women move into positions of power. You only ever see someone's true colours when they're given a position of power. And if you think that's not just happening at work, that's also happening in the home. And it was really just confirmed for me, the more I spoke to what police were seeing, it really confirmed for me that was certainly what was happening, that men were not the dominant ones holding the power in the house all the time now, that it could be one or the other.
Okay. All right. Fiona, stay there. We're going to come back and talk to you about what happened after you did your interview with Bettina Arndt and what's happened to you in the past week or so in just a moment. Stay with us. You may have noticed if you've been overseas on holiday recently that you can log into your streaming services like Netflix or Prime in other countries, but the shows they offer are different and sometimes even better. You're paying good money for those subscription services. Why can't you watch? Well, with a virtual private network or VPN, you can log in from home here in Australia with an internet address from anywhere in the world, and big corporations and big government can't see where you are. Now, to be clear, criminals can still be actively found with police warrants, of course, but the average honest citizen will have their location protected from prying eyes of corporate marketers and government bureaucrats. If you sign up now with private internet access, we think they are the best VPN service out there. That's private internet access. As a viewer of The Other Side, you can get 83% off the price of your subscription and get online for less than $3 a month. Check it out right now. Go to piavpn.com/otherside. That's piavpn.com/otherside. It's a great service and a rock bottom price, and you're helping keep The Other Side going and growing. That was a segment from a recent episode of our fortnightly news commentary show, The Other Side, with me, Damien Curry. If you liked it, support us. Subscribe to our channel on YouTube right now so you don't miss a thing. It's totally free. Just click that subscribe button and the little bell. And check out our Other Side Unplugged show too, and join our mission to actually do something and change Aussie media for the better at othersidetv.com.au. That's othersidetv.com.au. Check it out now.